I'm a self-ascribed loner, which means I don't need anyone labeling me a loner, because I know that I'm a loner and how I became a loner. You know, most loners, unless, at 10 years old you decide that one day you want to grow up and be alone and not have any associations. Other than that, the circumstances of life make you a loner usually. Not bad circumstances usually. You get older, you led a good life, but you never made many associations. You never kept up with your friends, whatever there were. You just worked hard, or worked, made a family, your kids get older, brothers and sisters live somewhere else, parents, and you wake up one day and you're roaming through life alone. See, most people that would describe you as a loner would probably say, well, he's a loner because he chooses to be a loner. He wants to be alone. He has no aspirations for anything else. He's deliriously happy shopping alone, eating alone, watching movies alone, spending nights alone, and so forth. Now, I'm not describing hell. It's what it is. Life makes you what you are. My mom used to say about my dad, and they were married well over 50 years. I don't want to get the dates wrong, so I'll just say well over 50 years. Before he passed. And she used to describe him as a loner. How can you be a loner if you're married? Because you may be married, but you may have different interests, and my father never wandered into people's houses to go see friends and have conversations. But he'd go to the mall with my mom or wherever they went, and he was the most cordial person in the world. He could hold a conversation with anyone, with strangers, and just love it. Then he'd come home and he'd spend most of his time alone with my mom, and but I never argued with the fact that my mom would call him a loner. She knew him better than anyone. Now, as far as being a loner, it is what it is. It's not a bad thing. If you accept it and base your life off all the good things in your life, and adjust to all the being alone most of the time. I was thinking the other day, I have these days when I get out of the house. In order to be able to do stuff, you can't just be locked in. And I don't like to be locked in. And I found at the end of the day that I had this thought in my head. I had it when I woke up in the morning, late in the morning, had my first meal while I was having my first meal. Later in the afternoon as I'm shopping around, from one grocery store to the next, because I really do need to have that, and I need to have that, and that over there. For whatever reason. It passes the time. So I thought about this late in the afternoon, and then when I was feeding my dog early in the evening, I had the same thought 3 times in one day. Because you can't go around just thinking bad things all day, or thinking, about all the problems in the world or whatever. You go crazy. So I thought about this the whole day, and I thought at night, I said, wow, I spent a lot of time thinking about this because I needed time to think. You see, as you get older too, there's only so much music you can listen on the radio station, and so much talk you can listen on a radio station. Sometimes you just want to drive without anything on, and you're just thinking. So I was thinking about this movie I had seen the night before. It's a movie that came out in the early 70s. It's called Mr. Majestic. It starred Charles Bronson. If you don't know who Charles Bronson is, he was a Clint Eastwood type as far as the type of movies he would make. But he had a little bit more edge to him than Clint Eastwood, and he wasn't as popular as Clint Eastwood, but he was pretty big. Everybody, he came out in The Dirty Dozen in the 60s, the Magnificent Seven, 1960 movie. If you've never watched that movie, you gotta watch that movie. McQueen, Brenner, Bronson, that's when I think he made his name. And he used to make some rough movies in the 70s. Remember the Death Wish movies? He was a good tough guy. Never said much, but when he said it, it's pretty strong. But I don't think I remember watching Mr. Majestic. But I watched this movie. It wasn't a great movie. They're usually not great movies. You just see them for certain reasons, like, hey, it's Bronson. But this is not about Bronson. There was a character in the movie. The bad guy. The one that was up against Bronson. Bronson's character. And I saw this guy and I said, this guy is the guy that played the character in a movie called The Getaway with I believe it's Steve McQueen and Ally McGraw in the early 70s. I think it was in 71, and then Mr. Majestic came out in 73. So there's this character in Mr. Majestic. He also came out as the villain in The Getaway. And in each one of those movies, especially The Getaway, I said, this guy's Jerry Stiller. Jerry Stiller's playing a villain in The Getaway. If you don't know who Jerry Stiller is, he's the one. He just passed away. He was a comic. He came out in Seinfeld and The King of Queens. He was awesome actor and comic. He teamed up with his wife Ann Mira in the 60s. They had a comedy team. They weren't that great, but later in life he made his name in Seinfeld and The King of Queens. So I'm watching. I had watched The Getaway a couple years ago, and I hadn't seen it in a long time. And I said, that's Jerry Stiller. Jerry Stiller's playing the villain in The Getaway. Looks exactly. This is. Because he used to do some serious parts too. Have you ever seen a movie called The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3? And I'm talking about the movie in the early 70s with Walter Matthau. He came out in that movie and he's playing kind of a serious part. So this is Jerry Stiller. But by the end of the movie I knew that's not Jerry Stiller. But he looked like Jerry Stiller. The hair and everything, and much of the gruffness, but Jerry Stiller's not as big as this guy, but no, it couldn't be. So I'm watching Mr. Majestic last night, and here's the villain. And I said, that's the guy that looks like Jerry Stiller that came out in The Getaway. So, wow, he's a dead ringer for Jerry Stiller. So I looked at the credits at the end, and the actor's name was Al Lettieri. He died in 1975. He was relatively young. He didn't have a big career. He started in, I believe, in the early 60s, maybe earlier. He had several movies here and there. But, yeah, he looked like Jerry Stiller. But here's the amazing part. I looked him up because I wanted to see if there was people who were thinking the same thing. Hey, this guy looks like Jerry Stiller. Well, forget that. What I found out about this guy was that he came out in The Godfather in 1972. If you've never seen The Godfather or The Godfather series, I'm talking about 1 and 2. Greatest movies ever made. Some of the greatest movies ever made. So you got the original Godfather came out in 1972, which is sandwiched in between The Getaway and Mr. Majestic. And it says that this guy was in The Godfather. And I said, Well, I would have remembered. I would have said, hey, look, Jerry Stiller's in The Godfather. But it's not Jerry Stiller. I would have said the same thing. But so I said, I remember him in the Godfather. I mean, this guy has a distinct look. It's a Jerry Stiller look. If you saw The Godfather, he was Virgil Soleri. The one that tried to assassinate the Godfather, the Marlon Brando part. The one that then got assassinated by Michael Corleone in the restaurant. Him and the bad cop. That's El Leteri. The same guy that was the villain in The Getaway and Mr. Majestic. I said, it's amazing. And I said, he didn't look anything. I mean, if you see him in The Godfather, he's got his hair jet black, in place, and you compare him to his parts in The Getaway and Mr. Majestic, yeah, I mean, if you look closely enough, you say, okay, yeah, it's him, but I never would have thought. That blew me away. I said, that's the same guy that, anyway. So I thought about that all day. 3 times during the day I was thinking about that. But the funny thing is, it wasn't that I thought about it. It was that I talked. Sometimes when you're wandering around aimlessly through life, and you're doing this and you're doing that, and you're alone, you have nobody to talk to, you kind of talk to yourself, not in a way where you're answering yourself. But it's sort of like I'm describing right now, my thoughts on the fact that a guy that looked like Jerry Stiller was in The Godfather. But the story here is that besides being a nerd for things like that, it's about the fact that those things are the things that we usually think about in everyday life, especially if you're a loner. You're thinking about inconsequential, insignificant things, because most of the things we do in life to get by are the mundane. Most days of life, you're not conquering the world. You're just trying to entertain yourself, and you're trying to entertain your mind. And nothing wrong with it. That's why I say I'm a self-ascribed loner, because I won't have anyone telling me, hey, you're a loner, or hey, Rob's a loner. How do you know? You don't know what I'm doing. If I'm a loner, you're not around me. I'll label myself. And only a loner can think of things like Jerry Stiller lookalikes and beautiful women like Sharon Tate who were horribly murdered. And, that's the way it goes when you're a loner. Well, at least that's the way I look at being a loner. It's like you're a normal human being going through life. You've experienced things, and now you're spending a lot of time alone and giving a lot of thought to things that will never save the planet, but you're saving yourself. So, for what it's worth, that's all I got.